Ever had one of those moments when your whole world, everything you thought you knew, just comes crashing down in a heartbeat? That was me. Standing in the hallway, clutching a steaming cup of coffee so tightly that I was sure it might spill over. I wasn't supposed to hear any of it. I was just walking past the living room on my way to the balcony when I heard her voice. Soft, affectionate, but not meant for me. I can't even stand to hug him anymore, she said. That laugh. A sharp, cold chuckle that made it clear she had already made up her mind about whatever or whoever she was talking about. I froze in place, unable to move. She was sitting on the couch, phone pressed to her ear, her back turned away from the door. Her feet rested lazily on the coffee table, swinging back and forth as though she had nothing to worry about. I couldn't make myself leave. I just stood there, every muscle tense, my heart racing in my chest. Her voice lowered, but I heard every word. I know. It's just when he touches me, I feel nothing, and it's like I'm just tolerating it. It's not exciting. A pause. Then another quiet, knowing laugh. Of course, I want to. I just have to be careful. He's not dumb. I exhaled, slowly and quietly, fighting to keep the anger from boiling over. The words were bad, but it was the tone that stung the most. That cold indifference, the smug confidence, as if she wasn't just rejecting me, but had already moved on. As if I was nothing but a joke. My fingers tightened around the cup, and for a moment, I thought about storming in there, demanding answers. Who the hell was she talking to? What did she mean by being cautious? But then something inside me froze. Confronting her wouldn't change anything. I couldn't undo what I'd just heard. No, I needed a different plan. She didn't want to hug me anymore? Fine. She didn't feel anything when I touched her? Perfect. From this moment on, she'd never feel my touch again. She thought I was just some naive fool who would either explode with rage or beg for her love. She had no idea what I was capable of. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I turned around, walked back down the hall, set my cup of coffee on the kitchen counter, and let her words sink in like poison, slow and sure. From that moment on, my wife ceased to exist for me. She wanted distance. She was about to find out what real, soul-crushing distance felt like. When the moment arrived, she would regret ever taking me for granted. She just didn't know it yet. The beauty of silence is that it can be far sharper than any harsh word. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't cry, I didn't engage in arguments. I simply withdrew, stopped asking how her day had gone, stopped reaching out to her, I stopped making any effort at all. I became an invisible presence in my own home. At first, she didn't even notice. For the first few days, she was too wrapped up in her own little world, texting, grinning at her phone, humming while she got dressed for work. She probably thought I was just tired, distracted, or going through one of those phases when men retreat without explanation. Perfect. She had no clue. During dinner, I would sit across from her and eating mechanically, not speaking a word. She didn't even look up from her plate. At night, when she used to curl up next to me, I turned over, leaving a cold, empty space between us. She didn't say anything. Not yet. It took a full week before she finally began to notice. One morning, as I was rinsing my coffee mug at the sink, she finally spoke up. Are you all right? She asked. I turned just slightly, met her gaze, and smiled. Yeah, why wouldn't I be? It was a real smile, but not the kind she was used to. It lacked warmth. She blinked, a little unsure. I don't know. You've been quiet. I shrugged. Just thinking, that was all. No further explanation. She lingered, waiting for me to say more, but I didn't. I grabbed my keys, walked past her, and left for work. Let her wonder. Let her experience the same uncertainty I'd felt that night. Standing in the hallway, overhearing her words. Let the silence cut deep. It was the little things that began to affect her first. She used to love movie nights. We'd cuddle on the couch, share a blanket, and watch whatever she picked. So, when she came home one Friday to find me already watching something alone, I noticed the flicker of surprise in her eyes. You started without me? She asked. I nodded. Didn't think you'd care? I didn't pause the movie. Didn't shift over to make space. She stood there for a moment, then sat at the far end of the couch, uncomfortable and distant. Perfect. The next day I came home much later than usual. Much later. She was waiting. Where were you? She asked. Leaning against the kitchen island, arms crossed, I set my keys down with a quiet clink. Out. With who? She asked, her voice sharp. Just a few people, I replied. Her frown deepened, clearly confused. People? I met her gaze, my face an unreadable mask. Yeah, people. Then, without another word, I walked past her, leaving her to stew in her own thoughts. For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Concern. Doubt. She wasn't used to being ignored. She was used to me pursuing her, fighting for her attention, asking her about her day. But that version of me was gone. She wanted me to fade into the background of her life? Fine, she could have that silence. Let her start to feel the weight of it. Let her cracks begin to show. The real change came 2 weeks later. By then, I wasn't just quiet, I was a ghost. I was physically there, but emotionally, I'd already checked out. I moved around her like she was just a piece of furniture. I spoke only when necessary, short, polite answers, never initiating conversation. Slowly but surely, she started to unravel. Want to grab dinner tonight? She asked one evening, trying to sound casual, like it was no big deal. No. She hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly. We could try that new place you mentioned last month. I glanced up briefly, catching the test in her words. She was fishing. She wanted to see if I still cared, if I'd jump at the chance for a nice evening together, eager to patch things up. I didn't. I'm not really in the mood, I said flatly, then returned to the book in my hands. The next morning, as I was getting dressed, I felt her hand brush my arm lightly. I flinched, just enough for her to notice, just enough to let her feel the cold wall that had been building between us. She pulled her hand back like I'd burned her. That was the first real crack, the first time she truly felt the absence I had created. The beginning of her desperation. A few nights later, I heard her moving around in the kitchen, the sound of a cloth aggressively wiping the counters, a nervous habit of hers. Then she did something unexpected. She grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, walked into the living room, and set them down on the coffee table. I glanced up from my phone. What's this? I asked, my voice flat. She gave a tentative smile. Thought we could share a drink. It's been a while. She was trying to fix something she hadn't even noticed was broken until the damage was irreversible. I stared at the wine bottle, then at her. I stood up, stretching casually. I'm heading to bed. Her smile faltered. Not dramatically, but enough. I saw that flash of disappointment, quickly masked by a veil of something else. Panic. But she didn't say anything. I left her sitting there alone. With 2 glasses of wine, she'd have to drink by herself. And that's when I knew. She was starting to feel it. The weight of it. The isolation. The hollow ache. The slow, suffocating realization that she wasn't special to me anymore. That I could go entire days without thinking of her. That her presence didn't excite me. And it was killing her. I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, listening as she quietly put the glasses away. For the first time in ages, I slept soundly. Because this was just the beginning. It didn't take long. Her desperation had already begun to show. Small cracks in her carefully constructed mask of indifference. A glance that lingered a little too long. A question she asked twice because she wasn't really paying attention. Too lost in her own guilt. She wasn't used to being ignored, but she still didn't know that I knew. That would change 3 weeks after I overheard her words about not wanting to touch me anymore. That night, the truth hit me. I had my confirmation. She had been careful, I'll give her that. Late-night texts, deleted. Her phone, always face down. Extra hours at work, carefully spread over the course of months. But she wasn't careful enough. One evening, I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone when it happened. A notification popped up on her screen while she was in the bathroom. Just a preview of the message. Tonight was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. The sender? Just the letter M. I stared at it. My heartbeat didn't even pick up. I had already known. This was just the proof. She stepped out of the bathroom, towel drying her hair, completely unaware. She didn't even see her phone light up. I kept quiet, but something inside me shifted. Up until then, I had been playing the long game. Psychological withdrawal, letting her feel the weight of her own decisions. But now, I had something she didn't expect. Now I had leverage. It was time for the first real strike. The following morning, I called in sick to work. She kissed me half-heartedly as she left for the office, as if everything were fine. I waited exactly 20 minutes before I opened my laptop. Step 1. Find out who M was. Didn't take long. A quick look at our phone bill revealed a pattern. The same number, over and over, showing up late at night. I cross-referenced it with her social media. It wasn't public, but people are careless. They like their routines. And just like that, I found him, Brian. A mid-level executive at some company she worked with. Handsome in that polished, fake way that men like him carry themselves. A guy who probably thought he was untouchable. I scrolled through his profile, taking in the carefully curated highlights of his life. The expensive vacations, the tailored suits, the smug smile of someone who thought he had it all figured out. I almost laughed. He had no clue that the game had already changed. The hunt began. Over the next few days, I became a ghost and a predator in equal measure. I did things she never imagined I could. I tracked their messages. I followed her once, keeping my distance as she worked late at some fancy hotel. I even slipped a tiny GPS tracker under her car. Nothing illegal, just a simple Bluetooth device that let me monitor her every move. The final piece? I hired a private investigator because I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to tear them apart. It took the PI less than a week to deliver everything I needed: photos, texts, even video footage of them entering and leaving the same hotel room. I had it all. I could have confronted her right then, could have thrown the evidence in her face, watched her stammer, beg for forgiveness, trapped her in her own lies. But that would have been too easy. She had taken her time tearing apart our marriage. Now, I would take my time tearing her apart. The trap was set. The night before I decided to take action, she surprised me. She sat down next to me on the couch, way too close for comfort. It was as if she wanted to bridge the gap between us, a gap she had created herself. "Hey," she said, her voice quiet, almost tentative. I gave her a blank look, not revealing anything. "Yeah." She hesitated, clearly trying to find the right words. "I feel like there's been some distance between us lately." It was almost laughable. She had the audacity to say that after everything that had happened. "Maybe," I muttered, not giving her anything more than that. She sighed, a breath full of uncertainty, then spoke again. "I don't want us to drift apart." Drift apart? We weren't just drifting. We were galaxies apart, but she still couldn't see it. I smiled then. It was soft, calm, and reassuring. The kind of smile I used to give her, the one that always made her feel like everything was fine. "I don't either," I replied. I could see her relax, as though she had somehow won something. She thought she had me back, like everything was suddenly okay. What she didn't know was that tomorrow would be the worst day of her life. The reveal. I waited until she was getting ready for bed to make my move. She was in the bathroom brushing her teeth, and that's when I placed the envelope on her pillow. Inside, everything, every text, every photo, every lie she had told me. She came back to the bedroom, humming, blissfully unaware. But when her eyes landed on the envelope, everything changed. Her smile faltered. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tight, almost trembling. I didn't answer. I just watched her, silent, letting the tension build. She picked up the envelope with shaky hands, her fingers fumbling as she tore it open. She started flipping through the pictures, the texts. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. The evidence of her betrayal, laid bare. She couldn't even speak. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Finally, she looked at me, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Where did you—" Her voice cracked. She didn't finish the question. It didn't matter. She knew she was caught. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, watching her crumble under the weight of her own lies. The silence dragged on, stretching out between us. Then I smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't a smile that offered comfort. It was the smile of a man who knew he had already won. "You don't have to touch me anymore," I said quietly, my voice unnervingly calm. "There's no need for pretense. You're free." She froze, her lips parted as if she was about to say something, perhaps to deny it or maybe to beg, but I raised my hand, signaling for silence. "I'm not arguing. I'm not raising my voice. I'm not asking you why," I said, letting each word linger in the air, because at that moment, I didn't care. The final blow had landed. She inhaled sharply, her grip tightening around the envelope, like it could somehow shield her from the truth that was unfolding before her. I could see the realization dawn on her, her mind scrambling for some excuse, some way to turn this around. She had braced for a fight, anger, tears, pleas for reconciliation. What she got instead was complete indifference, and that was the moment she understood. She had already lost me. Regret doesn't strike like a sudden storm. It settles in like a poison, slow and insidious. It doesn't kill you outright. It seeps into your veins, spreading until there's nothing left but the hollow echo of what you once had. I could see it now. The way her breath hit, the tremble in her fingers as she clutched the envelope, desperate for it to reverse what was already done. Her face paled, the color draining as if she were seeing herself for the first time. And that was the beginning, the unraveling, the realization that everything she had counted on was slipping through her fingers. I stayed silent, waiting, watching her crumble from the inside out. She didn't respond right away. For a few moments, she simply stared, as if trying to piece together how this had happened. I could see her mind working overtime, desperately looking for a way to escape, a clever lie to untangle the mess she had made. "Wait!" she blurted out, holding the envelope up like it could somehow nullify its contents. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, her voice faltering. I chuckled, the sound low and genuine, and she recoiled, visibly startled. "Not what it looks like?" I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. "Really? Let's not insult each other." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She knew then. There was no excuse left. So she tried to switch tactics. She softened her gaze, letting her voice shake, hoping to evoke sympathy. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "I wasn't thinking. I never wanted to hurt you," she stammered, her voice trembling. I tilted my head, pretending to consider her words. How many times? I asked, my tone casual. She froze. I let the silence stretch between us, drawing out each moment, letting her feel the weight of it. I could almost see her mind working, calculating whether to lie. But she knew deep down that if I had all this, I probably knew everything already. Her lip quivered, and she finally spoke. For months, she whispered, barely audible. Months. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I'd already suspected, but hearing her admit it, watching the shame flood her face, it made everything so much more real. I nodded slowly, almost mockingly. Months of mistakes. Impressive. Her eyes, glassy with guilt, looked like they were fighting to hold back tears. She reached for me, her voice faltering as she tried to explain herself. It wasn't like that, she began. But I stepped back, just enough to create a gap between us, a small movement. But it was all I needed. Her body tensed, and the reality hit her like a slap. I didn't care. I wasn't angry. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't holding on to anything. That, more than anything, terrified her. It wasn't the outburst she expected. It was the indifference, the complete lack of emotion, the coldness. Over the next few days, I became an expert in the art of silence. I didn't leave the house, but I didn't engage either. No fights, no words. I simply existed in the same space as her. Cold, distant, untouchable. And she hated it. She kept trying to explain herself, finding any excuse to be near me, hoping that somehow we could undo what she had already destroyed. She made me coffee in the mornings. I poured it down the drain. She asked if I wanted dinner. I ordered takeout for one. She sat beside me on the couch, acting like things were normal, but I stood up and walked out. Each time she reached for me, I pushed her further away. Every rejection, no matter how small, drove the knife in deeper. She expected me to explode. She thought I would shout, call her names, demand answers, but I didn't, because she wasn't worth the effort, and I made sure she knew it. The moment she truly broke, though, came about a week after I'd shown her the evidence. One night, I heard her sobbing in the kitchen. Real sobs, raw and desperate. Not the quiet practice cries meant to win sympathy. I stayed in the living room, flipping through my phone as if I couldn't hear her, but I could. I heard everything, and I let her fall apart. She was right there, so close, just a few steps away, and I didn't move a muscle. It didn't take long before she cracked. With a roar of frustration, she stormed into the room, her hair a mess, eyes red from tears, and her voice thick with rage. Are you seriously going to keep ignoring me? She yelled, her fists clenched, her whole body shaking with anger. Slowly, I looked up, locking eyes with her, and gave her a slight smirk. Yes, I replied, my voice steady. That single word hit her like a slap. Her body went rigid as though I'd struck her physically. Why won't you just yell at me? She demanded. Why won't you fight? Get angry. Do something. I put my phone down and leaned forward, meeting her gaze without blinking. You don't deserve my anger, I said calmly, my tone deliberate. You don't deserve my time. A flicker of confusion and hurt crossed her face. You're nothing to me, I added, the words hanging in the air like ice. Her eyes filled with tears. I was stupid, she whispered, her voice breaking. I finished her sentence for her. You thought I'd always be here, no matter how many lies you told, no matter how many nights you spent with him. You thought I'd keep waiting like a fool. She swallowed hard, her breath unsteady. I was wrong, she said quietly. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. Yes, you were. That was the moment. The moment she realized she had lost everything. Not just me, not just our marriage, but herself. I watched her struggle to process it, the walls closing in around her as her world began to unravel. I gave her 2 more weeks, 2 weeks of watching her fight desperately to pull me back, trying to undo the damage she had done. 2 weeks of her living in the ruin she'd created. Then I made my move. I didn't pack everything, just the essentials. Just enough to make it clear that I wasn't coming back. She came home that evening to find me zipping up the last of my things. She stopped in the doorway, frozen, eyes wide in shock. Wait, she whispered. I didn't stop. Where are you going? Her voice was small, vulnerable. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as she reached out. Can we talk? I picked up my bag, slinging it over my shoulder. And for the first time in what felt like ages, I looked at her directly. And I smiled, the same detached, empty smile I had given her the night I left the envelope. We had already spoken. I turned and walked past her. She didn't make a move to stop me. She didn't even try to follow. She knew. There was nothing left between us. As I stepped outside, leaving her behind, stepping into a future where she no longer had a place, I felt nothing but a cold sense of satisfaction. She had asked for space, for freedom, for excitement. She wanted to be free of me, my presence, my touch. Now she had exactly what she wanted. And that I knew was the worst punishment I could have inflicted on her. Regret is an inescapable shadow. It clings to you when everything else is gone. It lingers in the silence. It fills the empty places where love once thrived. It stifles you. Every breath becomes heavier. My ex-wife, she was suffocating in it. I made sure of that. The reality she now had to face was all hers. When I walked out that night, I didn't just leave. I erased myself completely. Her number? Blocked. Emails? Ignored. Mutual friends? I made sure to cut those ties too, letting her drown in the silence. I was gone. A man she once knew. A man she once had, and now a man she would never get back. She had chosen her own path, and now she had to walk it alone. The fallout was swift. Her affair didn't stay a secret for long. I made sure everyone knew. I sent the evidence to her family, her friends, her colleagues. I even made sure Brian's wife got the full picture. She wasted no time destroying him. Their little fantasy world was shattered beyond repair. Brian's wife filed for divorce immediately, taking everything with her. As for my ex, she soon realized that, and she had given everything up for, wasn't the hero she imagined. He had no interest in playing the role of knight in shining armor for a woman with nothing left to offer. They barely lasted 2 weeks after I left and before he vanished as well. And then she was truly irreparably alone. Months passed. I moved on. I found a new place, a fresh start. My routines were mine now. My peace was mine, a life that belonged to no one but me. Then, one evening, I saw the message. From her. She had found a way to reach me. I stared at my phone, reading the words again and again. Can we talk, please? I need to see you. I nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. How predictable. She had played her hand, and now she was facing the consequences of her poor choices. She'd thrown away a good man for a fleeting thrill, and now, with everything crumbling around her, she wanted to rewrite history, to salvage the damage she'd caused. But here's the thing about burned bridges. Once they're gone, they can't be rebuilt. I didn't answer her, not even with a single word. I blocked her number, cold, silent. Let her stew in the regret of her own making. Let her live with the choices she'd made, because, as far as I was concerned, the game was already over and I had won. She would spend the rest of her life fully aware of that. The thought lingered. People often say that revenge is a dish best served cold, but what I had, it wasn't revenge. It was justice. She had bet everything and lost it all. And the worst part? She had no one to blame but herself. As for me, I walked away, unscathed. This is the end of the story, so don't forget to share your opinion and experience in the comments. And also, if you like the story, subscribe to the channel that would not miss new videos.